Welcome back, everybody. We are going to begin a new multi-part series, and that is going to cover how to throw multiple sections of a piece, flip one upside down, put it on top, attach, and then you get a new taller piece without having to throw it out of one large clay. So if that's something that you want to see, stick around and find out how we do it. In this new series is something that I'm really excited about. I'm going to go over what I like to call cylinder stacking, because in the first two parts, we're going to talk about how to throw cylinders and then stack them on each other to create a new taller cylinder that most likely is really hard to achieve by throwing it out of one piece. So looking at the diagram on the screen, you can see variation A is how to have your rims both flat and attach them on each other. And that is what we're going to cover in part 1 of the cylinder stacking series. Part 2 will cover how to adjust your rim to make it beveled like the image in variation B. So that's bevel on bevel. And then finally, my favorite, because it's the most robust and most strong, variation C, where you create a little indent on the bottom piece so that the top piece can go inside of it like a puzzle. So this first two parts will cover the basics on how to stack your pieces. So to begin part 1, we're just going to jump in to how to do variation A on the cylinder stacking. All right, before we are ready to start, there are a few tools that I do recommend you get prepped before you begin this training. First off is either a caliper or a ruler. If you can't get a caliper, definitely a ruler. Calipers are used to gauge for thickness. This is really good when you are making a lot of pieces and you want it to be the same width. You can make your own calipers, but if you were to buy one, I would definitely recommend this red one. This is called a lid master. This is perfect to make lids for jars, for teapots, and things like that. And it basically is this, but with a opposite side. And I'll put the link in the description below. We'll definitely be using these when we jump into making jars and lids in future videos. You'll also need a needle and or a scratch and score tool, or both. And I can put some items in the descriptions as well. And then you definitely need to be throwing on bats. And so I'm using 2 square bats. They take up a little less weight when you flip it up and put it down. I don't recommend you throw directly on the wheel head because you will need to switch these out as you throw. So bats are definitely required, or it will make your life a lot easier. You need at least 1 bat though, because you will be flipping one part onto another. All right, and then like I said, we're using a 2-pound and a 3-pound. We're going to use the 3-pound for the base and the 2-pound for the top section. You can use whatever clay weight you're comfortable with, but I do recommend your base clay should be heavier than the top clay. So what I mean by that, if these are my cylinders, the smaller one should be with the lighter clay and the bigger one should be with the heavier clay, because we're going to take this lighter one and we are going to flip it upside down and then stack it on top of the top one. And so I will be changing the camera angle to capture the whole thing, but we're gonna get started with the 3-pounder first, the base. And that one we're gonna throw a little thicker so it can withstand the weight that we're about to put on top. And we're gonna throw this base first. You can make it whatever width you want. I'm gonna try to stay within the 4 to 5 inch width range. I'm gonna throw it to see how tall I get it. The base I'm gonna leave a little thicker than I normally do. And then the top, I want it a little thicker than a 1/4 inch so there's enough meat for it to attach on. So let's go ahead, get the wheel on. All right, so let's get this clay ready and prep to center. Roll it around, get that point on the bottom. Make sure it's more or less flat, straight. Tap the sealed, tap to get into that cone shape. And then sponge, sealing the edge, and then centering. Okay, first step, push down. Then we're gonna do a cone up. And then the way I like coning down, I just push forward with my left hand, squeeze at the base with my right, and then spread my thumb out for my left hand to then focus the pressure with this part. Okay, not perfectly centered, but it's okay. We're gonna go ahead and start moving on. And this kind of shows you don't need your clay perfectly centered to start digging your well. Okay, get my depth. There's a slight wobble. So when I do my open, I can definitely start centering this out. Okay, so I dug my well. Now I'm ready to start opening, and this is where I do the pinch and pull. So my left pointer finger draped over the side, middle and ring finger on the inside for my left hand, sponge in my right hand to push underneath. First thing I'm going to do is start opening. Okay. I noticed that my base is not the deepest that it can be, so I'm going to go back with my middle finger, add a little water to open that up a little more. And so I'm going to make the cylinder a little on the wider side so that it'll be a little easier to attach. I'm going to go ahead and open up even more now. And then I can start my pulls. So squeeze with this hand like a claw, and then my sponge hand pushes in at the base here to apply lubrication and pressure, and then I'm going to do the pull up. So this is the pull that I highly recommend to begin your pieces. Okay, you can see some wobbliness at the top, and I'm okay with that because I'm just going to be cutting the top to adjust anyway. Let's color this in a little bit. Let's open up the inside because I did it go a little too thick. So by middle finger, I'm actually digging deeper. So you can always dig deeper if you want later. My pointer finger here on the overhead cam is compressing that lip that was developing. And then now as I'm going out, this will be the edge that I get my left hand in to compress, and then I'll do a pull. So I push out with my inside hand, and I'm lifting up just a little bit to blend that new edge into the clay wall so it doesn't rip off as much, because clay will rip off when this happens. And now I can really get my hand in, hold this in just a little bit, to push the clay out and pull it up. My left hand pushes the clay out like that, my right hand pushes in, we compress, and then we lift up. So here we go, push out, push in, and then we pull. So this is my first official pull. Okay, a little more pressure with my outside hand because it's starting to flare out. When I get to the very top, leave it there for a few seconds and release. All right, so now that I have my cylinder more or less set up, we're going to be pulling it up taller to get the clay thickness a little more even, and then we're going to get ready to start the next cylinder. So once again, I push the clay out, create the bump on the outside, push the clay in, and then I start the pull. Okay, and remember, as you pull, release the pressure as you rise. You can see the top's getting really wobbly. But as I go through the entire pull, I can recenter that top. And when I get to the very top, I can throw in a compression to really compress that lip to get a little thicker. Okay, I'm just going to narrow the top. Okay, I'm going to do one more pull. So clay thickness wise, it's a little more than 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to go a little thinner on the bottom. I want to keep the top more or less this thin. I can always thin it out when I attach the pieces, but we're going to go a little thinner on the bottom. Okay, for your first time when you do it, you can keep the bottom a little thicker if you want, just to be safe. And it all depends on how wet your clay is and how confident you are in throwing thin. So if you are doing this for the first time and you're still kind of getting used to throwing thin, doesn't hurt to keep the clay a little thicker. All right, so I got my clay more or less set. I'm going to cut the rim because right now it is thicker and thinner and it does rise and fall. So that's where the needle comes into play. I'm going to cut about 1/8 of an inch down. Okay, we're going to move that. I'm going to clean up the top and compress so I have a nice flat wall to work with. And then clean up the clay on the inside and the slip on the outside. And I'm going to check for diameter now using my caliper. So I got my trusty lid master. I'm going to use these 2 points. There's 2 points you can see, pointy and curved. I'm using curved ones to gauge the diameter. So make sure that's running right across the center. So right there. And the cool thing with this is the opposite side will basically give you the diameter as well. That's why it's called the lid master, because you measure with one and then the opposite side will match as well. Okay, so this is my width. I'm gonna put this on the side. Gotta make sure that that doesn't change. I will check it again, but this is more or less done for now. So I'm gonna take this off and I'm gonna start the next piece. And if you can put this in front of a fan or under a fan or outside in the sun to let it kind of stiffen up so it's not so wet when you get the next piece attached, it will be that much easier for your seam to get blended and for the clay to not collapse on itself. So let's go ahead and pop this off. Put it on the side and start the next piece. All right, so I got the 2-pounder. Let's go ahead and get this centered. You see I didn't roll it like a joystick. We don't need to do that, it does help. But push it down, blend the edge, and then cone up and cone down. Or get it stuck first, and then cone up. Get rid of the skirt. And cone down. Okay, still a little wobbly, so I'm going to really push into the clay and compress. And then before I start digging my well, I want to take the calipers and make sure that my clay width is close to the width of the first piece. So I'm going to go ahead and push this down a little more. Okay, and let's check for... That looks pretty good. I can always stretch it out a little more. Sorry for the focusing. My camera's still doing some weird stuff. All right, anyway, let's go ahead and start digging the well. And one thing to keep in mind, if this is your first time doing cylinder stacking, I don't really recommend digging all the way down to the bat, because sometimes when you do that and you open, the clay gets really wobbly because there's no base anymore to support your clay walls, and you may end up with a thick and thin part as it goes around. So my recommendation is, as you dig your well, you can go almost all the way to the bottom, but leave some clay there so that you maintain that bottom, and that will allow your cylinder walls to more or less stay the same thickness without it going uneven, because we can always cut that out later. All right, so let's go ahead and start opening. That same pinch and pull technique. From the top cam, you can see that the thickness got a little thicker, so I can go and push that out. And now my clay base is about 1/8 of an inch, and that's perfect. So I'm just going to kind of flatten that so I don't lose as much clay once I dig all the way down. And then we're going to go ahead and open even more. And when you throw this one, it's okay if the bottom is a little narrower than the top, because when you flip it upside down, the top's going to be narrower in that sense. So it really depends. So it doesn't matter too much. But let's go ahead and flatten that out. Open this up. And before I begin the first pull, let's check for thickness one more time. Okay, that looks pretty good. And now we're just going to pull the clay wall up, matching that same thickness. I can thin the bottom out a little more so I have more clay to work with. And this bottom section, it's okay if we go thinner here, because like I said, that's going to be the top, and you want the top a little thinner anyway. But just be careful, if you go too thin, your whole cylinder won't have any strength to then support itself when you flip. Okay, let's add a little collar to it. We can always open it up after. I'll do one more pull. And another interesting thing about this technique, once you attach it and it becomes a taller cylinder, you can throw it like you normally would. So you can always thin it out more then too. But the more prep work you put into this part, the section, the less you have to do when you attach it. And that's always better, because once you attach it, it becomes a bigger piece. And if you're not used to working with big pieces, you can have some issues moving forward. All right, so thickness-wise, that looks pretty good. Width-wise, it's a little wider than I need it to be. So to adjust, before I start adjusting, I'm going to go ahead and then cut the rim, because I know it rises and falls a little bit. Okay, and then clean it up. All right, let's check for width. So still a little too wide. bring it in just a little bit, just the top is necessary. So this is the part that the measuring is really important, and a ruler does work. So right there I can go a little wider. Okay, went too far. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, now, because my walls are more or less set up, if I wanted to now push that clay wall out from the top, from the inside, now would be a good time. Then that will make sure that my walls aren't too thrown off. Sorry for the focusing, I gotta figure that out. Anyway, let's go ahead and I can dig my well a little deeper now to hit the bottom, and I can go ahead and open it up and push that clay out. Now you don't have to do this now. You could end up just cutting this whole thing away, but you can see that my opening is now very lopsided from the top camera. So if you needed to compress that, you use a sponge to push it down, and the sponge could help to open it up. And if you're like, oh no, I don't want to do that, that looks really difficult, then what you can do is actually trim it away instead. You grab the trimming tool of your choice, and then from the overhead camera, you basically, I'll use the round side first, you use this to then trim and remove what you don't want. And this is called wet trimming. You have to be careful though, these trimmings will stick to the clay wall very, very easily. So you gotta make sure to pull it out as you need. And this will help prevent that unevenness. And so if you don't wanna trim directly, if you don't wanna dig directly down to the base, this is what I would recommend to remove that extra. You can flip to the flat side and take care of this now. And then I'm gonna leave a little meat. So right there you can see from the overhead cam, some trimmings got stuck. So I'm gonna peel that away. Now, like I said, this is only necessary if you're doing this for the first time and you're a little worried about the clay getting a little off center. You can see a little bit is stuck to the clay wall. But anyway, you take the sponge and now you compress. And it is still a little off, and we'll be able to really center that once we flip it upside down. And then I'm gonna get this piece off, because that thing's bothering me. So needle will be your friend, just try not to gouge the wall. Okay, and then before I pop this off and start prepping everything to get it attached, what I want to do first is create a little groove at the base with a wooden knife. So I take the wooden knife and I create a little groove, because this is going to be the top piece. I want to make sure that I have a groove for the wire to cut into, because if I don't and I cut, I can end up cutting at a weird angle, and that will leave me a very uneven top. Okay, and then last thing that I recommend doing is bring your other cylinder to the wheel and then measure both the diameters before you start taking the stuff off and scratching and scoring. So I'm going to try to figure out this focusing issue, and then we'll get back to the rest. All right, so I got my two cylinders, and before I line them up on each other, I want to make sure that the diameters are more or less the same. And so you're going to take your calipers and then check the diameter. And they look pretty good to me. We'll end up flipping this onto there, and then that we can do a final check when we're ready. But for now, we're going to more or less keep this flat. And okay, so we're going to go ahead and start scratching and scoring. And so this is where a scratching and score tool comes into play. You can use your needle, that does work, but you basically would have to kind of scratch like this, or you just do it stationary. I prefer this one because you just kind of put it on top and just go zigzag. And if your clay's really wet, you don't have to scratch and score too much, but the texture does help the clay stick to itself better. Okay, that looks pretty good. All the extra from here, just take off. And then now we're going to take this off and get the base piece on. So I'll put on my container of water. Get this base piece on. All right, and then same thing. Spin the wheel. Scratch and score. I can slow the wheel down, just do another round. Okay, and then before I attach it, I do want to get either water or slip on here so that the attachments get even stronger. So I got some water for my throw water, and what I'm doing, I'm just squeezing it on the rim to get it nice and wet. Okay, so from here, I'm actually going to switch cameras. I'm going to put the overhead camera on my hat for a point of view so you can easily see the angle a little better, and then we're going to get these attached. All right, I got my wire, I got my pieces slipped up, I'm ready to get it flipped over and attached. And when I wire it off the bat, I basically take my wire, I pin it against the bat, and I'm left-handed, so I use my left hand to then drag across to get it cut, and I pop the bat off. And it would make more sense once I flip it over. So I'll put this down. We'll check for sizing to make sure that the diameters more or less line up, and that looks pretty spot on. So I'm going to go ahead and then put it down and make sure it looks good from the front. And yeah, that looks really good. Sizing looks perfect. And then kind of tap a little bit to get it more or less stuck. And so now when I cut, like I said before, I take the wire, put it up, and I slide it into that groove I made. Then I pin down the wire with one hand, in this case it's my right hand, and then I'm going to slide across with my left like it's a windshield wiper, like that. And the reason I recommend that instead of just pulling is sometimes when you pull, you end up sliding the piece off. If you can pin it down, your hand that's pinning down the wire will allow you to move this hand without the bat moving. In theory, of course. Okay, so I can begin the first pull. So my thumb is here bracing up against this corner, making sure that it's underneath and it's not, so when I pull, my fingers are like this and I'm sliding. So that makes sure that I don't lift and cut higher than I need, or lower than I need in this case. So I start sliding and it's starting to cut through. So right there, I can feel it, so now I can start pulling it across. And normally I would look at it, but because I have this point of view camera, it's kind of harder to see. Basically slide until the whole thing's cut. Perfect. Just put that on the side. And I also have this camera to see how I'm cutting. But normally when you cut, you want your head to and eye level to be here so you can see. All right, so we're gonna pop this off. And then now when you see inside, we have this more or less really nice and set up. And I'm going to keep the point of view camera on for a little bit so you can see how I do the blending. All right, so first thing, blending the outside. I like doing it before I touch the inside so I can blend here. Some people like blending it before they wire it off. So it's really up to you on when you want to do this. There's no really right or wrong way, but I'm just applying very light pressure, and you're going to want to get a few ribs to help you for the next parts. And so the first rib that I'm going to be using is the round, and I'm going to be using the somewhat rounded part on the seam to really kind of level that out. I'm going to apply more pressure and blend that a little more later, and then we're going to work on the inside next. And so for the inside, if your hand can get in, you can use it and get there, but if you didn't cut this bottom off completely, now is the time you want to use your needle. So you take your needle, and just like how we mark the foot in your pieces that you throw, you spin the wheel, and then you mark where you want to cut, and then you just push down, and you just want to make sure that you kind of stop right before it cuts all the way through, and then you just peel that away. And then with the sponge, you clean it up. All right, so I can adjust that a little more. You can see from the point of view cam, there's a little undercut here that I'll be able to thin and pull later. And I want to focus on the seam so you can see that there's that seam still present on the inside right here. So I want to blend that away. And so the first blend you can do is with a tool or your finger or your sponge. I like using my finger because I can actually feel the clay. So I'm getting my finger up against it. Hopefully you can see it from the point of view. And my outside hand's just kind of supporting the clay. And I'm just blending that seam so that clay is more or less kind of even. All right, and now I'm going to grab my ribs to do the final blending. So I'm going to grab the round rib and then the straight rib. It's up to you on which ones you want. This one's going to be on the inside, this one's going to be outside. So the round is to get the seam over there, and then the flat is to be on the outside. Now I don't recommend flat on the inside because if your inside wall is not perfectly straight, you're going to be removing clay that's not the seam. So like this, and I compress. Okay, let's get those areas wet. Get this inside. I'm going to use this side right here for it. And I'm going to be pushing right against the seam. Okay, that's right there. And then this I'm going to compress. And what I'm doing is I'm just pushing the clay together, and I'm slowly sliding the ribs up to then kind of blend it up going vertically. Okay, and then I release pressure. And now this is more or less a solid cylinder. I could blend the seam a little more if I want, but from here I'll just throw this top, and you could potentially shape this if you want. So I'm going to change the camera angle back to the stationary, and then let's get this finished. All right, switch the point of view to the stationary, and now we're ready to then basically get this back into a nice cylinder and then thin out the rim. To get this rim adjusted, it's just normal throwing at this point. You spin the wheel, add some water, and you can see a slight wobble. So what you may want to do is, after you get the seam blended, is you do a little collar, and you're pushing any of that wobble that you have up towards the top. And then we adjust this by thinning this out and pulling it up. So I'm going to go ahead and add some water, and I'm just kind of pinching it first. So you can pinch it between your sponge and your pointer finger. So I pinch like this, and this is just at my, it's like what, 430. And I pinch, and then I start to kind of pull that up a little bit. And I can do a fingertip pull here, pull that up a little more. And then I can do a collar. And I can do another pull. Right, and then I can do a compression. Now, one thing is, if your middle seam was a little on the thicker side, I would recommend doing a quick pull through it so that you can kind of really blend that clay together. And so if I were to do that, it's just like a normal pull, but you just start exactly below the seam. So my seam is right here. I'll look over here. I'm doing a fingertip pull. So that's mostly just kind of pinching the clay between both fingers and then pulling up past the seam. And you could do all the way up if you want. You don't have to stop slightly above. And I'm actually going to go a little higher because right here is pretty thick. I'm going to pinch slightly below the seam. So my pointer finger, my inside hand, my left hand's right here, and I'm pinching with my sponge. So I pinch, and then I'm doing a compression pull. So right through the seam, and then I'm going to start doing a normal pull as I get through the top. And then release the pressure as I rise, and then compress. All right, so from here, you more or less have a cylinder that you can do whatever you want with it. You could stack another piece on it if you want. You could shape it. You could get it more orb shape. You can also get it more straight to be a straight cylinder. So that is the stack on top. Now, if I were to shape it, I may start seeing the seam develop because that was flat on flat, and when it pulls out, it tends to open and flare a little bit. So I wouldn't recommend really shaping it if it's flat on flat. Flat on flat's perfect if you want to keep the shape more or less straight. Thank you for watching part 1 of this multi-part series. In part 2, we are going to be covering how to do the cylinder stacking with variation B and variation C. So if that's something that you want to see, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can see that video when it comes out next week. I got a little bored. I finished the vase. I stacked another piece on the very top so it is a little taller, but I'm not here to talk about this vase. I'm here to talk about the new membership program that I just released on YouTube. So now, if you want to become a member of this channel, there are 2 tiers you can sign up for. The first tier is the Mud Club, and it's $1.99 a month. You can cancel anytime. And with that membership, you are supporting this channel and helping me grow the channel, helping me make more videos for you guys, buy more tools, supplies, and even if I do review videos, it helps to buy those things because making the videos is not free. And if you really love the channel and you want to give more support, I have the second level, which is the Mud Club Plus, and you get a few more things unlocked. You get direct messaging with me on social media, and I can answer any questions that you have. maybe not any questions, but I can answer some burning questions that you have. Send me a video, send me some pictures, and we can talk about what might be happening when you're throwing. And I'm also going to have curated video checklists that really fine-tune the videos that you should watch in order to really improve your throwing, because of course right now they're just in playlists, it's not really organized. And you get a shout out at the end of my videos. So at the end I'll shout out all the people who are the Mud Club plus, and every month you're subscribed, your name will always appear in all the videos moving forward. And so that way it's a keepsake, it's a memory that's forever in the MW ceramic videos. So hopefully you guys join to help grow this channel to something even bigger than what we have now. And stay tuned, I do have a Patreon that I plan to release, and with the Patreon I will unlock some more interesting things like handouts, hopefully discounted prices on tools that I plan to release soon, ceramic ware that I'm going to release. And until then, if you can join and become part of the MW's Mud Club, I greatly appreciate any and all support. So anyway, thank you guys, and I'll see you later.